I'm Heather Vale with Performance Marketing Insider, and I'm speaking with Ted Dhanik, President and CEO of Engage BDR. Hey, Ted, thanks for being here with us.
Hey, Heather, thanks for having me.
So today we've got a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about fraud. Now, what exactly does fraud look like when we're talking about digital advertising?
Well, it's not a purple minion. I mean, it's not cute. So
Okay.
it's vicious and it's pretty ugly because we're finding it to be anywhere from 40 to 98.5% of the inventory that we see on real-time bidding out there. So it's vicious. It's pretty crazy, and it's made just for the greedy people out there to make money on mostly branded advertisers. But unfortunately, when new technologies emerge like RTB, it's really made. Those are the guys that end up buying the inventory, and then most of those guys are performance marketers that are trying to back into an eCPA or CPL or something like that, and it crushes them because they're buying inventory that is fake and it never ends up converting.
Okay, who exactly is committing this fraud?
It's hard to say. My life would be in jeopardy. No, just kidding. So it's really hard to say because that's not the intention for us. And I actually sit on a number of committees with the IAB, and one of them is the Traffic of Good Intent, which we have recently renamed. What was it now?
Trustworthy supply chain.
Trustworthy supply chain. So we're in the business right now of developing a taxonomy for the entire industry to get a better a feel for the definitions and what should be acceptable, what's not, what's fraud, what's not, what's this, what's that. And so we're trying to figure that out. But yeah, who's responsible for it? We don't know. We don't care. We want to be able to identify which traffic is fraud pretty quickly and get to the bottom of it from there and be able to filter it out. And so that's that's what's going to optimize the industry and keep us going.
Okay, so you're talking about this like it's a huge problem. How prevalent is it actually?
Oh, it's a huge problem, Heather. It's 40 to 98.5%, and that's just based on our numbers. There are some placements that we see in RTB that'll be 99% fraud or 99% never viewable, and that's bad news. And there's some placements that are 100% fraud. And you know what? And in addition to it not being real, there's a lot of other stuff happening, like the cloaking of the domains and things like that, where these. By the way, some of these ads will serve in a 1x1 pixel, and you'll never see them. And so this is not just across display; it's happening across video as well. So you'll find like video pre-rolls happening on the page when you never see them, and they're happening in the background. If you open your live headers, you'll find that kind of weird stuff happening. So it's a pretty big problem when you're paying for an ad that never gets seen. And yeah, that's the challenge with that industry today.
Okay, so how much is this costing advertisers?
Sydney, what is it costing advertisers?
$11.6 billion problem.
It's $11.6 billion problem today, and that's just
Billion? Billion with a B. $11.6 billion.
$1 billion
Wow.
yesterday. Today,
Wow.
It's growing because as everything else, just grows. It's another business that's growing. The fraud business.
Okay, so what do performance marketers need to be aware of? Obviously, they want to increase their ROI. They want to get real views on their ads. What do they need to be aware of in general when they start placing ads?
I think it's a challenge these days. Creating honeypots and things like that would make a huge impact just from a best practices standpoint. If you're a lead gen advertiser primarily running on RTB, you can create a honeypot on your landing page. So that's kind of cool, where you have you have a field that is hidden from the user. The only person that would be able to fill out that field would be a robot, which is not really a person. So they're like, that's got to be fake. So you see any of that stuff happening, you know that placement is generating fraud. Now some of this fraud is very advanced, and they'll fill out leads and stuff like that too sometimes. So it's kind of crazy. Things like that are great, but one thing to understand is when you try out RTB and it doesn't work for you, beware of two things. One is it display that's not working for you, or is it, hey, I just bought a lot of fraud, because that's what ends up on a lot of it ends up on RTB. So there could be two things going on. The chances are more likely that the latter is happening, that you're buying fraud. So how do you prevent that? Well, you buy from DSPs that have the ability to fraud scrub impressions or have the ability to either give you a score on the risk score on the impression, and the other side of it is viewability. Now, I'm a big fan of viewability. Now, having a risk score associated with an impression is great, but it still doesn't tell you if it's viewable or not. So you have two challenges. You have fraud, that's not viewable, and then you have impressions that are real that are not viewable either, just because they're below the fold and it's just landfill quality traffic. So I think to nail both of them, you get a viewability score. So First Impression, or DSP, is a platform that enables you to optimize to viewability. So we give you a viewability percentage or score on the traffic you're buying at a placement level. So you can say, hey, CNN.com, I'm buying it, and it's 0.5% viewable. So it's probably not CNN.com, and you probably don't want it because it's not viewable, unless it's somehow backing out, and that's great. So it's probably not going to happen. So yeah, viewability scores are key in this business, because in performance marketing, to get an action, you require the user to see the ad to click on it. User cannot click on an ad if they don't see the ad. And if they did, that'd be really weird. So that is the number one thing to take advantage of. Now, viewability measurement, that's another topic that I'm very passionate about. Kind of like, people have cool hobbies. They like to paint. They like to do other things. I talk about viewability. That's my thing. So viewability measurement companies that exist out there, beware. There are some that are certified by the MRC and the 3MS standards, and those are great. Now, other companies that are providing viewability technology, beaconing, measurement, things like that, they're not certified. They are not. They are companies you don't want to work with or even consider, because they are not. It's a black box. It's kind of like behavioral targeting when it first came out. Really, nobody understood it because they just really didn't know how the user was acquired. And it's a big black box. You don't know what's going on inside there, and you don't want that for viewability. It could really mess you up. You could end up spending money in places where you don't need to. It's just not, you don't know what's going on. So I would only stick with vendors and technologies that have been verified and third-party audited. So third-party auditing is very different than self-auditing. So you have, on the IAB site, you have a couple lists. You have a self-certified list. Look for that, which really doesn't mean anything. I mean, it is complying, which is great, but it does not mean that they have been validated and accredited by an auditing company. That's key. So you have to look for third-party verification and companies that are verified for third-party. Now, going back into the initial topic, which was us, we are third-party verified for everything that we claim to be certified against, and viewability is one of them. So we are always evolving, and that spec is a moving spec. So things are changing in the measurement guideline as well. So that was just my little tangent about viewability. But I think that viewability measurement is key in detecting fraud. But the underlying issue is performance. You really need to get to the bottom of performance, and you nail it with viewability. So at the end of the day, that's the one I go for, and that's the one that's most important to me. I don't care if it's not a fraudulent impression and no one sees it. It is useless to me, and I don't want to see that impression anyway. So.
Okay, so how do you guarantee that this impression has been viewed by a real, actual person?
So the way we measure viewability, I mean, it's a proprietary technology that we're protecting today, and several other companies have their own versions as well. We look at things in the browser, in the client side, to make sure that it's a human. Now, the way that happens is there's engagement, there's movement on page, there's coordinates, there's lots of things happening, number of pixels in the ad unit that are supposed to be seen, the time, the duration, things like that. So that's the stuff that really enables us to tell it's a human. The bots have not been able to replicate these behaviors, and I'm not saying that they're not going to be able to do it in the future, These guys are pretty smart, but as of today, it is there's a huge correlation between effective CPAs being low and viewability scores being high. So that gives us a good place to optimize to today. So that's key. Now, segueing into time, as I mentioned a little bit about just a second ago, the time as far as the impression being seen, that's key. The 3MS standard is 1 second for display. I believe that is 2 seconds for video, and 1 second meaning it's got to be viewable 50% of the ad unit for at least 1 second. Now they think that enables the impression that gives it enough time to be able to be seen by a user and that kind of thing. At least it's above the fold or whatever, right? So that's key. Now we adhered to that standard and we complied. We complied a while back and we got certified against it by BPA, which is a third-party auditing firm. We believe that is not enough time. We think it's a great direction to take with the quality of advertising today and good intent for online advertising. But I think that we, on the progressive side, were initially launching a technology about 1.5 years ago that enabled us to sell time slots of an impression, and we are still doing that today. And it's the demand for it is increasing. So we're saying when the ad is in front of your face, we know it's in front of your face, and we start the clock. So as soon as we see your face, the clock starts, and we sell slots of that. So it could be like a minute, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 3 minutes, or whatever, right? Let's say that you go away, so you flip the page or something halfway between that impression, that you got only 30 seconds of that. What ends up happening is you don't get billed for that impression because it didn't hit that 1 minute time slot threshold. Let's say it did hit that threshold, then you see a new ad after that. So it's rotating based on viewability and slots that the advertisers are buying. Now that is kind of like how television works, except television cannot validate if you're in front of it or not. It just knows that you're, it just pre-programmed for time slots. So we are all used to buying advertising in time slots. I mean, pre-roll is sold that way as well. I think display should be sold that way too. So we're on the forefront of that and still piloting and testing with a bunch of advertisers. So the new currency is called guaranteed time slot, and it's just not. There's a couple companies out there doing this, including us, and maybe only 2. So it is something that is worth testing with more advertisers. We've been doing it in pretty big scale for at least 1.5 years now, and it's growing. It's a new currency, and any of those new currencies don't get adopted that quickly because they're, it's all about building the market and things like that. But the good thing is it's leveraging viewability, which is growing in demand today, and time slots sold inventory like pre-roll.
Okay, so you're talking a lot about fraudulent impressions that are created by bots. How do we know that it's not a person creating a fraudulent view? Or, sometimes like I'll hit a page and then something happens and I get up and walk away from my computer. Like, how do you know that someone's actually sitting there looking at that page?
Yeah, I mean, part of the engagement aspect of knowing if somebody's there is like mouse movement and stuff like that, and then keystrokes and things like that, right? So
Okay.
we can see when stuff is happening, and so someone's there, and we know when the ad unit is at least 50%. I think we're measuring 100%. 100% of its pixels are within the viewable screen area, which means it's not below the fold. Bottom line, right? So those are the key aspects of measuring that. Now, as far as like friendly fraud, which is what you described, like you're an advertiser that's buying buying clicks for your shoe site, and you see your competitors' listings show up on sponsored search, and you're clicking on them because you want them to get billed for them. That's friendly fraud. It's not very friendly.
It's not friendly.
Because it's not like you can't do a lot of it, right? So.
Okay.
From that standpoint, it's like there's not a lot of scale in that. You can get your entire office doing things like that. Like I think Uber did that to the mustache car company. What was that company called? Lyft. I think Uber did that to Lyft and they got caught, right? So it's kind of similar, and they're canceling rides or something, right? So eventually we'll find a way to block that stuff too. But there's not a lot of scale in the human side. Human time is worth a lot more money than the revenues generating from those fraudulent impressions. So. I think that eventually there will be some technology there to limit the frequency or something like that. I think that we can probably set frequency caps, and then you're done for the day or something like that. But yeah, this is really trying to stop stuff in broad scale, which is the billions of impressions that we see. It's like 50 to 100 billion plus impression requests across RTB a day, and how many people are online? Doesn't
A
make
lot.
sense. Right. So yeah, but not that people aren't creating that many impressions a day a piece. So that's we're trying to really get at the limit the scale first.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that a genuine view could be as low as 1 to 2 seconds. If someone's only paying for that time slot, can't a bot recreate that? Like, it seems like a pretty short amount of time.
So, no, I mean, again, we're talking about, like, there's a lot of things inside the browser besides me giving away the proprietary recipe that cannot be replicated yet. So there's no fear of that at this point, but 1 to 2 seconds is the standard. That's the standard. That's not what the slots are sold at. No one's going to buy a 1 or 2 second slot. I think it needs to be a minute plus. Okay, so it's going to be a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes plus. And generally, it's brands that are doing this today. It's not so much the performance marketing community yet. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. And yeah, currently most of the stuff that we're selling to the performance community is the traditional impression. It's not the time slot impression.